All right, guys, welcome back. This is Dimitriadis. I'm going to go ahead and go through and do a quick demo here on one of the assignments we're doing. We're working on painting different types of spheres, learning how to use our brushes, and I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit today about painting rock and texture and using layer and some of the layer effects for creating some really fantastic quick variations. So in rock or stone texture. So first thing I'm going to do is I brought up my image here. And I'm going to go, just as a reminder, go into levels, okay? I'm going to, adjust some of the white in there because it was a little bit gray when it got posted on the blog. I don't know why it does it all the time, but it does for some reason. And I'm going to create a couple more layers here. I'm going to touch this, relabel my key layer here as a line, put it up on top, and I'm going to lock it. And then that way I can adjust this as I'm painting. I don't have to worry about painting on it or anything. I'm going to lower down the opacity just a little bit here. Okay, of that line layer, and then I'm going to paint on these two. Now, when I lower the opacity, I can see the checkerboard underneath. So what I'm going to do is come back here. I'm going to grab just a base white, and I'm going to fill the bottom layer really quick here, just like that. So now I'll be painting right on top of this, and I'm going to start over here with the rock one first. Okay, all right. So, and I'm going to paint on the separate layer over here on the right, so that way it's in the middle. So I'm not going to worry about the circle right now. I'm just going to block in a couple things and see if I could show you, just give you a couple of suggestions. Now, one thing that's really going to help if you're going to paint any type of variation in surface structure is you need to look at some reference and have a good idea of actually what is happening with that particular surface quality. Now, I just typed in stone just really vaguely in Google, and look, it brings up all kinds of really cool variations here. And what's really neat is I can grab something like this and I could take a look at it and see, little patterns of dark and light and little gradients. I can see how the stone is moving across, and there's going to be different types of stone. So I just typed in stone very specifically. I could be once I research stone a little bit more, I might type in, like if I come over here and type in granite stone, okay, and see what comes up. I'm going to have some different effects of different granites, okay. Let's just say, for example, I know offhand, let's say I typed in sandstone, okay, oops, sandstone stone, that's okay. And look, it's going to bring up some other variations there. Now, it's giving me more of sandstone texture that would be used in, household materials or in people's backyards or tile or whatnot. So what I might have to do is come over here. You have to be just sort of specific. What if I typed in sandstone rock? Okay, and then there we go. Now I start to get some really large variation shapes here. And what's going to be helpful for me is to be able to click on something like this and look at some of the variants here. I mean, look at sandstone. A lot of it gets worn away by water, and it has these natural little lines in here. And if I think about that, that could be extremely useful for me in painting a sphere, where I could wrap my sphere with some of these dark lines that are in here, and I could produce, some type of stone effect accordingly like that. So look at the reference. It can be hard sometimes just to paint something out of your head. I'm going to go ahead and try just to create something just out of my imagination here. So one of the first things that I do whenever I paint anything is I like to work from darker and then work up. I like to block something in and go from there. And so let me go ahead and start there. I'm just going to come over here. I'm going to start to block in sort of a base value set here. Okay, there we go. Actually, let me go. I'm going to change brushes here, and let's use one of the new ones that we created here. There we go. Okay. Give me a second. Let me pause the recorder for a minute. All right. Sorry about that. I paused for a minute and I realized I'd made a mistake on my line layer. I didn't put it on multiply. So actually it looked like this, and it was lowering the color, and I'm like, why is it doing that? What did I hit? And actually it was just a user error, of course. I just didn't put my line layer up on multiply all the way there, and that's that's sort of what I was going for, is I wanted to get that color. I like to work like this, a little bit darker. And let me go back here and select that brush that we had. Got that thick texture brush. Okay, it's coming out really large, which is okay. And let me just scale it down a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to come in here and just start to block in, and I'm going to be hitting, I just hit 4 on my keyboard, going back up to like 6. I'm just going to block in. I like to see patterns that might be coming out of the stone automatically. My light's going to come from left to right, and then, you know, working darker to lighter. So I just threw down like a real clump of brown here. Okay, let me get that little corner there. There we go. And hold on a minute. There we go. I accidentally. There we are. Okay. So I'm just going to block this in super fast. Okay. There we go. Just get some kind of really neat looking pattern. Go a little bit darker on the edges there. I have that lock on my line layer, right, guys? So you're not going to be painting on there. That's sort of cool. So I have something to start with right now. Okay. Let me go a little bit darker around the edges there, just a teeny bit more. There we go. All right. So what's really cool is, watch. I'm going to just watch how quickly I can do this. I'm going to take this layer that's right here. I'm just going to duplicate it right now, so it's sitting on top of itself. Okay. And then I'm going to go to levels, and I'm going to lighten that. So I'm going to come over here, and I can lighten this really quick. And then what I can do is I can come over and I can move that around. And if I erase some parts of this as I'm working, these little other parts are going to sit down. They're going to have that darker value underneath, right? So this could be a way that you could start creating some stone effects out just by coming in and erasing part of what is already there. And you're actually going to get that darker value to sort of pop through in some parts here. It's just sort of one approach. Let me just get into it and mess with it for a little bit. Sort of jumping back and forth to different variations. Okay, and again, look, it's sitting up on top right here, and so I can now manipulate it. I can drop what I like to do is I drop it down a little bit, and then I can even move it around. I can see if I see, you know, a little bit more of a stone shape in there, and that's sort of cool. I like what's happening right in there, and what I'm going to do is commit to that. Okay, but I'm going to duplicate this dark layer again, put it up above. I'm going to use that in another way. So let me show you. So what I'm going to do is I merge these two together. So that's what I sort of have. Then I'm going to come in here with this, and I'm just going to take an eraser. Okay, let's go back here. And same thing if I was using a brush. I'm just sort of working backwards. I duplicated that layer. Now I'm going to erase a bunch of chunks off of it and see if I can get some dark, like little spots. And I can do the same thing if I wanted to with a brush. So with a brush, if I wanted to do that, to get in here and put some little spots, I just come over here and find one of my textured brushes. Let's just start with, let's try this guy that we created earlier. Okay. I'm going to see if I can come over with this guy here, and let's put some dark spots on him. Going on. Okay, that's weird. I'm having some Photoshop issues here. Okay, get the recorder back on. There we go. You get some little textured feels in there. Okay, just move it around, have fun. And then what I'm going to do is let's commit to that. And I put this on top, so now I could come in here if I wanted to, and I could erase some little patterns in there. So I'm going to go to like 100%. So every time I'm touching, I'm erasing. Let's see if I can create a really cool sort of stone texture coming through part of that. That's sort of cool. I like that little blend in there. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to commit to that now. And then I'm going to come in here and I'm going to start to create some little cracks on my stone, and then we'll come back and place some little highlights on it. And I have this sort of some cool variations happening in here, and I just got that by manipulating just some real simple variants and gradients and brushes on top of each other, duplicating the layer, just, you know, sort of expedited process of just trying to get to, you know, an end resolve here to have some type of variation in stone there. Okay, here, let's come in here. Those brushes I created, by the way, are huge, so they're coming off extremely large. So let's get in here. I'm going to start to paint get a couple cracks happening in this. I'm going to go ahead and switch to the couple brushes here I'm really used to that I use quite a bit. And let me get on my eraser. I'm going to clean up a little bit so I can see a little bit more of what I have. So if you want to clean up really quickly, something that you can do, let me see if I can get this to work right here. If I come back here, I'm going to select around the line drawing itself. I'm going to hold V. Oops. Let's try that again. Just select around part of the line drawing, hold V, and I was hoping it would select it separate. That's why. There it goes. Oops. Why am I having all these issues with... Okay, sorry about that, guys. I'm having some issues. I'm losing a lot of my buttons, my command buttons here in Photoshop, and I'm like hitting them and they're not appearing as I'm working, and I think that's the memory in the recorder. So let me just sort of go back into this and backtrack. I just had a pause there, and sorry, when this happens, it's really frustrating to me because it limits what I can do, because I'm hitting like erase, and erase isn't switching, and the toolbox are sort of goofing up. So I was going to select that, inverse it really quick, and for some reason my selection option isn't working right now, and I just want to keep going, so I'm just going to manually erase this. I was going to select the circle itself and then just inverse it and delete around it, which is, you know, a pretty simpler way, but I'm just going to do it manually right now. Sorry for the delay here. There we go. Let's get rid of this. All right, so anyway, I have just a base rock texture on there now. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to paint some cracks in there, and then I'll come back and start brushing on some little highlights, try to create that real definitive sort of rock texture. Okay, so let me just work on that for a little bit here. Let's start with the cracks. Okay, there we go. Brush, 100%. Make sure it's working all right. Good. And this is something, every now and then I get this side effect using the recorder where it just, for some reason, it doesn't, the memory gets eaten up and starts to affect. Sometimes it does it, sometimes it does not. So I'm just coming in here and trying to look for little bits of dark and light where I can maybe get some cracks happening and fade them off a little bit. Again, trying to use the cracks to wrap the form. Little dark values, and then fade some of that crack off into there, so it gets more of like a stone pattern. I'm doing all this on one layer. If you guys want to work on multiple layers and then commit to them later, that's totally fine. Okay. So right now I have what I call just like a good base. I haven't put any shadows in there, haven't put any little detail. I have just a nice solid little base that's starting to get into that sort of rock feel, and once I get in there and really start to pepper some little highlights and some other, you know, gradients or little details, it'll really start to pop out a little bit more. So let's do that right now. Let me come over here and I'm going to switch brushes over here and actually go back to there. And what I'm going to do right now is come over and start brushing some little highlights on some of these edges, and that'll get the cracks to really sort of set in there. So if I'm going to swab that color, then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to lighten up quite a bit. And I am going to do this on a little separate layer. I'm going to go down to about 4 or 5 right in here. As I come over here and sort of push along and then sort of create a part of that highlight along part of that edge, it's going to start to give me that feel like I have a nice crack sort of happening. So I'm constantly, again, I'm hitting my keys, I'm changing from 1 to 2. I'm going to have a little bit, the stone's not going to be too reflective, but I might have a little bit of a highlight like up here. I'm going to come along just really lightly using my pen pressure and just sort of try to highlight the edge of that little crack right in there. You see that? Make that area a little bit brighter there. That little corner in there. Here we go. And if I want to get, if I have a part that's not quite blending in, you know, you could come over here really soft with your brush, go down to like 10% or 5, select part of that, those areas, and then just sort of blend them together by painting on top of them. There's nothing wrong with getting in there. It's going to it'll be a little bit more time to render some of that out, but that's okay. Okay, and so I still want to get in there and I want to darken those cracks a little bit more, but I'm going to save that. One thing I want to do is I want to get a couple more. I want to get some like more texture and sort of a gritty feel to that. So what I'm going to do, so if you look at that, I just put some of those highlights on there. Okay, I'm going to come up over here and on a separate layer now. Let's try this. I'm going to come over here and I want to go for something real dark, and then I'll lighten that up, and I just want to try to get some little dots and little texture. So watch, I'm just going to do this on the side here. Just see if I come over here and just sort of create these little stipple effects. Get a little bit lighter as I go up here. And the benefit of having this on another layer, see, now I can take that and I can move that over on top to part of my stone, and then since it's another layer, I can go to levels now and see I can darken it up a little bit or adjust that and get that to fade in there a little bit more. And since I did that, watch, I can duplicate that. I can rotate some of that, put it over here, rotate it up, put a little bit of that texture back in there like so. Okay. And what's really cool too is I can do the same thing. I could turn that into something very light as well. So I can take that and I can duplicate that layer and I can move it over a little bit. And now I'm going to go back to levels and I'm going to lighten it up. There. So you see how I just did that? I lightened it up, and now I have this sort of these little like yellow little dotted highlights. Okay. So I'm going to put a couple over there, And actually, let's say I want to make these a little bit smaller. I can transform them. It's on a separate layer. I might put a couple in, let's say right in there, and move a couple more around. What's really cool, if I move them down here and it's a little bit darker, I might pop out a little bit too. In that little corner, that's sort of cool. And I'm just going to take all these, I'm going to commit these together. And then I'm going to go back into it, and then what I like to do is I walk away and then I come back and then I paint a couple highlights, and I'm going to push some of the cracks and try to do a little bit more blend. I have all that on a separate layer over that base sort of tone there. So now I can erase some of that out and come in and really polish this up a little bit more. And that's how whenever I work, I like to create what I call like my base tone. And then I have to like to have my little layer of detail. And then I come back on there and I go over it another again and one more pass and put more highlights, more cracks, really define part of the shape that I'm going for. And then, you know, adjust any fixes for anything that I don't like. So let me pause real quick. I'll paint for a little bit, and then I'll come right back and finish that up. Okay, guys, welcome back. I just took just a break here real quick to just sort of paint on top of this. So let me just show you a couple of things I did really quick. I came in here and I created another layer up on top, okay? And I just put some more dark lines in there. And the dark lines, I just come back really lightly with a brush and with a darker value, and it just really allows me to get some really finite sort of cracks in there and make it feel like it's sort of a rock structure. The next thing that I did is that I created this sort of this shadow layer, okay, really quick here. Let me show you exactly what it looked like. When I put the shadow layer down, this is what it looked like. It was just a pure sort of dark shadow that's in there, but and that kills my detail. But by then coming over here and putting this on the multiply, it's going to blend that in. You see that as a darker value on it. But then if I come over and I drop the opacity down, I can get that shadow to sort of lightly blend in. But now you can still see the cracks that are sort of underneath it and some of the highlights. Okay, then I came back in and then I started, you know, painting a couple more highlights up on top of there, and I started hitting a couple edges that are in here and starting to get some of that upper, I'm going to call it the upper cracks, to sort of come out. And so a general rule of thumb on how this is going to work is that anywhere that I put highlights, okay, on little edges, it's going to pop it forward, and anything else that I push down with in terms of adding a darker value, it's going to push that value away. So I like to think of this as, you know, pushing and pulling of shapes, okay? So the more little highlights I put on little areas, it's going to pull it towards me, and the more little dark cracks or dark values, it's going to push the objects down. So what I'm going to do is I have, you know, I'm starting to get quite a few layers here, but I like to show that process just real quick, how I sort of went through that. We had a base tone, right? We had something that was starting to look like. I made some little stipples. I placed them around. I put some dark lines in. We put some little highlights in here or there. And then I have a nice little shadow that's creating a little bit more of a core shadow. So I'm starting to get something that's, I've just painted it by hand pretty quickly. I'm not looking at any reference, doing it out of my head, but I'm starting to get something that looks and feels like it's stone and it's cracked and it's a little bit older. And what I could do is I could keep working on this and rendering it a little bit more. And from this point forward, I've sort of created my own, you know, texture to work from. So what I like to do here, let me bring some of my highlights up above. I like the way the shadow's looking right there. So I'm going to take these, I'm going to merge all these together right now, commit them into one layer, and I'm just going to keep my highs separate. That way, I put this highlight right here, and I was sort of imagining, you know, those like onyx balls. They can have cracks in them that are, you know, really sort of tighted, but at the same time they sort of have a little bit of a highlight there. And so I sort of just hit that highlight, and I'm starting to put a little bit of reflective light in here. So I'm going to come back here on my highlight layer, and I'm just going to do a little bit more while you guys are watching. So I'm going to brush in, have a little bit of reflective light there. I'm going to come back here, get a little bit more reflective light that's going to be sort of bouncing off the back side right here. See if I can adjust this a little bit more, get a little bit of that highlight right in there, get some of that right down here as well. And again, sort of lightly fade it out. See that? Get that nice little crisp edge right in there. I want to come in here. I started working on some of this and I didn't really finish it, so let me see if I can create a couple little cracks in here in the front. And my brush right now, I'm sorry, let me minimize my window there so you can see it. My brush is about at a 30%. I'm rotating between about 50 and 60, putting on these little highlights. Now I've just jumped up to 60. I'm just trying to get in here and get these little cracks in here. And, you know, it's actually pretty hard for me to talk and do this at the same time. When I find myself working at home, what really works is I'm quiet, I'm listening to music, and I get in the mode. And when I get in that mode, I start to produce it. And when I'm here doing this talking to you guys, I notice I get a little sidetracked sometimes. This is exactly what I was working on. So, and I like that little fade off there. It might sort of break off here. And then another little highlight. So I'm just trying to come up with these little patches, these little gradients of darks and lights and little highlights and where they're sort of working together and how they're creating, okay, little, what I call little pits of highlights popping, and then little areas of dark and light also coming together, you know. You just see these little patterns that start to emerge out of it. And, you know, you just keep working on it and starts to get a little bit more and more like, you know, the real McCoy. What I'm going to do now, is this is sort of cool, is I'm going to use my lasso tool, and I want to darken some of my cracks in here. So look, I'm just going to come in here and do this sort of light dark pattern selection like this. I'm going to hold my lasso tool down here. I'm going to come over, grab this area here, maybe a little bit in there. Like so. I mean, I could paint this in, but I could also do this pretty efficiently just by grabbing some little parts or areas like that. Let me grab what's in here, inner crack, a little bit in there. Okay, and what I'm going to do, watch. Let me hit Control H right now to hide my ants. I'm going to select the right layer I want to adjust, which is this main paint layer right here. And now that I have those ants selected, watch, I'm going to go to levels right now and watch what happens when I move the slider around. See how I'm automatically just adjusting those little cracks a little bit more? Okay, and just that light adjustment in there, just getting that to fade in. I don't know if you can see it, but I just really got those cracks to pop a little bit more. Watch, I'm going to hit OK. Let's Command Z, see the difference? There it was, and then there, I just darkened up a couple of those little cracks a little bit. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to select that value. And where it's a little hard edge, I'm just going to just paint a little bit on top of that. Spread it around so it's not such a really defined edge in there. There's some times where I like that defined edge, and there's other times where I want to get it to sort of fade in. Okay, let me check something here. There we go. Too busy talking, not focusing. Here, so I'm just going to lightly paint on that. Get that to just lightly gradate and fade over. Get that edge to sort of come off a little here. Okay, come down here, hit a couple highlights in there. Now, let's take a look at when I take off my line. My line's key because if your line is really black, it's eventually going to flatten down part of your image. And so what I want to do as I'm working is I'm going to come over back to my line. I'm going to start to dull my line down. So I'm going to allow just the overall value of the paint to sort of take place. So now my line it's down to about 30%, and I like that because I can see more of the value that's taking place on the rock. And now I can maybe come in here, and even though this was a sphere, maybe I can add a touch or two. Like what if I come over here, and what if I have like a dark little chip of this rock coming up like that, and then I just come over and I'm just going to sort of paint right in here. So what I need to do is just completely lose part of that line, or what I'm going to do right now is select it. I'm going to take my eraser, I'm going to erase part of that line so I could paint the rock upward right there. I'll erase a little bit of line off there, a little bit down off the side. And this is, you know, this is important because when we start to lose our line, the shape of the the texture and the tonal value will hold together to keep it, not the line. The line isn't going to do that. The natural gradient's taking place. So I've erased parts of my line around there. Now I'm going to come in here and I'm going to sort of paint this. Maybe this part of this stone is coming up a little like that. It's cracked up there a little bit. Grab that darker value in there. Get that. I'm going to take that darker value and paint a little bit of a crack in there. See that? Boom. Just sort of hit that little detail in there. So it looks like this is sort of raising itself over. There we go. And come down here. Look, I have a little chip that might stick out there. Why not, right? That'll create a little bit more of that texture feel. So if I get that right in there, and then I paint a little bit of this over here a little bit. And here I'm going to indent. I'm going to take my eraser and I'm going to indent a little bit in that crack right there. Oops. Let's try that again. There we go. See, by indenting that crack, it's going to allow my eye to see part of the form of that texture. And it's going to enhance the silhouette. And we grab a little bit more of that darker crack value. Sort of punch that up a teeny bit in there. Okay. Same thing over here. I'm going to come over here, erase, and then take a chunk off of there. And then dip that down, erase that little overspray right in there. But it's not bad. I mean, again, I'm doing this out of my head and just sort of throwing it down real quick. My new glasses on, which I'm not used to yet. Started this lecture without them, and then I had to switch to them. Okay, so that's not bad. I still, what I like to do is I've been working on this now for about 20 minutes. My eyes have become sort of used to it. What I like to do is put it away now, go work on something else, and then come back and look at it and be like, hey, maybe I should punch that highlight up. Maybe I need more defined cracks up on the front there. And then I sort of manipulate it and work off of that. That's just my own personal. And let's just go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and take those highlights that are on there. I'm going to commit them all into one. So now it's just all one layer. Okay. And then I might come back in here. And, you know, the one thing I never did is I never brushed in and smoothed off some of these other areas that I adjusted in here. So I'm going to do that real quick. Just come in here and I really like that natural gradation I got in there that's sort of working where like the stone gets a little dark right in here and then it fades to another color and it gets a little bit lighter. Again, anything that has a white edge is going to pop out a little bit more, right? So here, let me go up to like, I'm going to go to like a 70, an 80% line. Let's try to come in here. Let's go darker value like this. What I'm going to try to do right now, I can do it on another layer to show you, is I'm going to, look, if I do a contour line, thick, and then thin, thick, thin, thick, thin. I want to come in and see if I could put some little contour lines in here and sort of wrap the shape a little bit more and add that as another little successful part of my texture in here. So let me delete that, what I just put right there. Let me create another line so I can show you the difference. I'm going to come back to my brush. I'm going to go really small to where like I can't even really see the brush itself. And I'm just going to be looking for these little crack lines that I'm going to put in my stone here. That's going to add a lot of little detail my eye will see, especially an area of little highlights, like right in here. There, my brush is a little too thin, so I had to there, you know, I like what's happening back in here, but I don't like, I got these weird sort of like highlights in there. I need to work on that, this area in here a little bit more. So I'm just trying to get this thick and thin lines, just sort of variations happening in here. Gotta be careful. If I put too many, it could ruin part of that sort of rock effect here. And now that, let me just look at the difference. See where I just drew those in there like that. Just adds a little bit more detail and puts a little bit of thick and thin natural variations of what's going to be happening with stone. Like that. There, I'm going to commit to that now. Okay. Let's see, what else do I want to do on here? I want to erase a little bit more. I'm going to get that front area to pop up there a little bit. Erase that little corner there. See if I can come over here and put a little bit more of a highlight. Get this area to pop up a little. Oops. Adjust my line a little bit over here, erase some of that in the back here. Okay. And throw a couple contour lines overlapping some of that shape. Let me double check. Let's get a little bit darker down here, the shadow area here. Okay, so that's not bad. I mean, I'm liking that. I need to actually leave it alone for a little bit. So I keep messing with a couple little areas, but that's not bad for like a stone. It has like that earthy sort of feel to it, and I can go back into it, manipulate it a little bit more. And again, it's just, you know, baby steps, build up, you know, from one point to another, and you just keep going. Just use your layers, keep building and building. A lot of overspray there. Let me erase a little bit of this that's around here. Okay. Let's get rid of some of that line quality that's down there. All right, there we go. Okay, so that's sort of our stone demo for today, and I'll go ahead and wrap that up.